Let's welcome in our Friday Five as we welcome back the admirable Stubblefield.
Good morning again, Rob. Good section with Glenn Elliott, I thought.
And the Badger, Michael Height.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Also, Michael Carl, senior member of our crew.
Good morning, everybody.
Larry Schultz in studio.
Great to be here again.
Welcome back again. Via telephone, Joseph Joey Toots Ferretti. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning. You always say that your sponsors are sponsoring in part the broadcast. So which part am I sponsoring? Is it just when Bill Stubblefield's speaking?
That's a good part to sponsor, Joe.
But you're getting charged for the whole thing, Freddie. Don't make any mistakes about that.
Well, we would have it no other way. Yes, well, if you were the sole sponsor of the show, there would be no other sponsors at all. So,
but
we have several sponsors.
You're not breaking the show down in segments.
Let's throw it back at him, Rob. Which section would he be sponsoring? Would he choose to sponsor?
I think he would sponsor, like he said, whenever Bill speaks.
He's a good man
He's
indeed.
a good man indeed.
I like Joe Ferretti.
Right? Whenever Bill speaks, that's brought to you by Joe Ferretti, the Mansion Ferretti Law Firm. Are you happy with that arrangement,
I don't endorse everything he says, though.
Why not, Joe?
There's a list of reasons.
What?
Come on, Mike.
We only have an hour.
You can put in your claim now, Joe, with the disclaimer, which parts of what he says you like and which parts you don't.
Well, from what I heard, I don't want him singing.
That's true.
That's been established.
And we go a little something like this. Hit it.
As the final Friday closes down a month of news we're retaining, the original Friday Five gathers with another attempt at entertaining. What a week of information we've had, so rich yet so contrary, including wrestling matches live from Arlington National Cemetery. Let's be honest, you'd buck up for pay-per-view to watch Trump wrestle Walt, and you wouldn't be surprised if Trump kicked him right in the bald part of his head. Speaking of Walls, I get what they're trying to do. With all the sports analogies I see him making comparisons to. I know he won a state title in football. They won't let us forget it. We all know you were a coach, Tim. Enough now. We get it. And then there's his counterpart, Mr. J.D. Vance, who sticks his foot in his mouth with every chance. But this week, he truly answered the foot and mouth opening bell when he told Kamala Harris she can go to hell. We've come a long way from the Lincoln-Douglas debates, oratory replaced by defamatory deciding political fates. Like Seinfeld once said, there's no comeback for a vast G mateys, or wishing one's opponent a trip straight to Hades. And speaking of hell, the drought, combined with temperatures in August, continued to bake, so much so that you can't even boat now on Summersville's Lake. The middle part of the state is in drought so extreme that dust is now the official state meme. It's so arid the legislature may be forced to take up a new bill with speed and change the state flower from rhododendron to tumbleweed. There's good news, though, on the economic development front, with plenty of opportunities to expand your job hunt. There's 3 new companies coming to the state at which some once laughed. Babcock and Wilcox, Prime 6, and in Berkeley County, Handcraft. In West Virginia, there's now 1.5 jobs available per every unemployed person. So no more filling out that unemployment paperwork and all that unemployment cursing. Like I said, that's good news, and that's good news that thrills. But because of inflation, you need those 1.5 jobs just to pay your bills. It was a pretty good week for the governor, whose financials we are obsessed. And at the end of this week, the Greenbrier still wasn't repossessed. Jim's money problems weren't in the news so much this week. Instead, the news was dominated by drug abuse numbers, which were downright bleak. The opioid crisis continues to hit West Virginia particularly hard. To tell the drug dealers from the drug manufacturers, you need a drug scorecard. 17,000 babies born each year in the state, with 2,500 exposed to drugs in the womb dictating their fate. So while we all got burned out on Big Jim's financials in the headlines, and wish something would come along to make us forget it. As the ancient Chinese proverb says, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And with that,
Very nicely done.
we move on to Mr. Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti, our leadoff hitter.
Amazing. While he does that, he's also designing plays for his football team. Amazing.
Just the special teams plays.
Rob, West Virginia certainly is not alone with problems in education. Test scores nationally are going down. Absenteeism, tardiness is going up. Teacher shortages now are evident in over half of the states where they're lacking certified teachers to teach in the classrooms. The Economic Policy Institute indicates that teachers nationally make 26% less than other college grads. The Brookings Institute looked at teacher pay worldwide. And of the top 25 industrialized countries, the United States ranks 19th out of 25 in teacher pay. And of course, we understand the importance of teacher pay. A University of Texas study recently indicated that there is, of course, a direct correlation between teacher pay and school performance, teacher retention, teacher hiring. And get this, the average teacher pay across the country is right now approximately $66,000. Adjusted for inflation, that is 8% less than teacher pay nationally just 10 years ago. Daniel Pink, who is a columnist and author, recently indicated that to really arrest the problems that we're having with education nationally, we need a moonshot. We need something bold to go forward and really change the trajectory that we're on with education. He talks about how we're near an imminent collapse of the public education system in this country and advocates for a base salary of $100,000 per teacher. He indicates that if you pay that kind of money, which is equivalent to what you could make as a salesman selling cardboard in this country, if you pay that, morale will increase, retention will go away, retention problems will go away, hiring will be robust, and students will benefit because they will not only be taught by a certified teacher who wants to be there, but there will be plenty more teachers in the pipeline to serve the needs of this country in the future. Kids will actually want to go and major in education in college. They don't today. Today, the teachers are underpaid, underappreciated, overstressed, and it's not working for this country. As we found in West Virginia, throwing pay raises of $2,500 to $5,000 to a teacher is not making a dent in the problem. So who wants to get bold here? Who wants to come up with a minimum salary that is reflective of what these teachers have earned, many of them with master's degrees plus? $100,000 may sound like a pipe dream, but maybe something like $70,000 or $80,000 as a base salary should be instituted in this country. Tennessee recently, under a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, set forth a minimum pay scale for teachers in Tennessee. Is that something you should emulate across the country? That's my question.
All right. Now, Delegate Hornby, in the previous session, tried to propose a larger increase for teachers than what had been done previously. Couldn't get it really to get through finance and such. Let's go to our resident delegate in the panel, Michael Haidt.
Well, first, I wish I had gone into cardboard sales.
I don't know. Halltown Paperboard closed down. Maybe it's not as lucrative as Joe's painting.
So do I think teachers deserve more pay? Absolutely. $100,000 a year, I don't know if I'm there. And you can look at places like Tennessee. Tennessee is revamping all of their education policies, not just teachers. And a lot of what they're doing over there, they're doing because they have tons of money that's pouring in through tourism. They have enough money over there through tourism that they don't. Just recently, I heard that they don't take federal money for education anymore, which allows them to do lots of things because they don't have the federal mandates anymore. And one of the things they've decided to do is to pay their teachers more. Kudos to them. West Virginia is not in that position. We cannot afford to not take federal money. We are a taker state. We take much more from the feds than we pay back in. So we are not in a position to do that right now. But having said all that, yes, teachers deserve more money. It's just how do you get there? And Joe, you made the comment that these $2,500 and $5,000 dollar pay increases aren't making a difference, and I think they are. I think the new superintendent from Berkeley County came on here and says he doesn't have the vacancies that we've had in the past, and they are filling in the teachers for Berkeley County, and you see that across the state. So I think improvements have been made. Are we where we need to be yet? No. But I certainly don't think that we're at the point where we need to pay teachers $100,000, and it's just such an arbitrary number. You have to base it on something, and I don't know what the $100,000 number means.
Larry Schultz.
I come from a family of teachers who've taught in various states. None of them have taught in West Virginia, where the salaries are not competitive with certainly our neighboring states. If we were next door to Arkansas, then you wouldn't see maybe so many of our teachers leaving to go to a 15-mile drive to a 20% better salary. This has been a problem for an awful long time, even in places like Berkeley Springs. I had a person close to me, my first wife, who was a school teacher in Berkeley Springs, and began to look around after she got her master's to see what else there was, and ended up at Hancock, which is, literally from downtown Berkeley Springs, 6 miles away or 7, and got a massive pay increase to go there as an experienced teacher. Because Hancock, all kinds of small towns that are isolated like that, they have a hard time drawing teachers, and so their pay reflects that. They have to pay a little more to get the teachers in, and she made some 40% more money. Now, this is in 2000. Maybe that problem isn't quite as bad today with what's happened in the last 20 years, but my guess is our friends from Maryland are keeping up with the game. And so if you are a teacher in Berkeley Springs and you have financial problems like paying your student loans, it's almost a crime against your family not to drive over to Hancock and get that extra money. There's no difference in the schools, really. There's no difference in the kids themselves. A lot of them families have moved back and forth to both towns for years, for generations. And so there's no real difference except the money. And when you get in that spot, people with student debt and other big payment problems, I mean, we're at a point now where 2 young teachers just out of school who both get jobs in West Virginia cannot afford to buy a house. Cannot afford to buy a house unless Uncle Bob or somebody gives them the down payment and maybe helps them with the thing. They can't afford to have children either. It used to be that teachers were middle-class citizens, and they're not anymore, not in West Virginia.
Bill.
Yeah, I'm not sure Joe was using $100,000 as an absolute, more than a provocative statement. I think the premise is correct, though. We look just across the Potomac River, Washington County. I believe the new program starting out the teachers $65,000 plus starting salary, far in excess of what we're doing in West Virginia. To me, what is kind of a disturbing rebuttal is that we've looked for smoke screens to justify our low test scores, and which are kind of the basis for how we judge the education system. One smoke screen is that our testing is not universal, not uniform across the country. That may be true in part, but let's not use that as an excuse for not to do something. Let's actually take a hard look and to try to fix the point that if you have any discussion, education very quickly rises to the top of something that we need to fix. But we've been given just lip service to it. We have not taken a hard look of how to fix our education. And I think it comes back in large part to the recruitment and retention of our salaries. Dr. Sachs did say he thought we were doing well, and I hope he's right. that was kind of the newcomer on the block, and by definition, you try to sound optimistic. I hope he's right, but I still think if you're competing with a county right across the river that pays $65,000 plus for a incoming first year teacher, we have a long ways to go.
Mr. Michael Carl.
Well, I generally agree that our teachers are probably underpaid in general, but let's keep in mind first of all that the whole one of the underlying principles of being a public school teacher is that you're a public employee, and so you have some job security, but you are competing with other teachers in nearby states and so forth. So I think it's ironic that our powerful teachers union has failed in what should be their number one priority, which is adequate pay for their members.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if they push for that, then because it's a public job, non-members would get the raises too. But I think that we ought to move and take a serious consideration, certainly of the competition with nearby other states and what they're doing.
Mike, the state has passed, is it 5% raises?
Five out of the past 6 years.
And 5 total in Governor Justice's 8 years, correct?
That is correct. And I'm going to push back against Larry a little bit, that if you look at around the state, it's not the same around the state. That if you go down to border states of Kentucky and Ohio down in the Southwest, I think the teacher pay that we currently have is very competitive down there across those borders. Where you see the disparity is up here in the Panhandles, particularly in the Eastern Panhandle, but you also see it in the Northern Panhandle, the Mon County, the Preston County areas that are close to Pennsylvania. And those are the areas, which is why we push for locality pay so much, that disparity is much greater in these areas. But what teachers are getting paid, and I'll say Mingo County, I've been to Mingo County several times in the past couple months, teachers do very well there. The housing doesn't cost as much down there. If you get 2 teachers living together, and they are some of the most wealthy people in those counties. So other than minors, but so they're doing very well down there. But it is the reason that we need to continue to push locality pay for these areas.
Mike, with those 5 pay increases, how much do they account to in total?
Oh, I don't know the dollar amount. Obviously, it'll be different depending on where you are step-wise.
It's a 5% in general. Not if the higher you were up in salary, the less of that percentage
Correct.
you got.
Yeah.
The idea was to bring up the starting teacher pay to make it more attractive to kids coming out of college to choose West Virginia instead of Maryland or Virginia. That was the overall goal of the raise.
And let me ask one question differently. What is our average starting salary now?
I'm thinking it's high 30s. Close to 40.
Okay. And contrasted again to what we say in Washington County, so a large differential.
Sure.
But the point you made, the problem's more pronounced in the Eastern Panhandle or the Northern Panhandle than it would be in Mingo County.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See, it seems to me that when it comes to paying public employees, be they teachers or state government, you have 2 choices. You can be a low-tax state, and then the salaries will not be as good because of that.
Correct.
You don't have as much revenue you're kicking in. Or you can be a high-tax state, in which case your public employees are going to make more money, but they're going to pay more taxes. So you'll never have the salaries in West Virginia that are competitive with Maryland or Pennsylvania or Virginia for the simple fact that you're not paying those kind of taxes. And one of the reasons so many people move here after they retire is because the taxes are so much lower than they are in other places. So in Maryland, I'll get personal here. I have a 4-bedroom colonial house, right? I just paid my property tax bill. It was $6,200. Okay? My state income tax bill, which thanks to the Trump tax cuts can no longer be fully deducted off of my taxes because I don't itemize any longer, is the top tax rate in Maryland is 8 or 9%. when you combine the state income tax with the local piggyback tax that's on the counties. So that, depending on the county you live in, you could be paying anywhere from 7, 8, or 9% in state income tax. So but my teachers, the coaches that I work with at football and the folks that are in the classrooms, they're getting paid pretty well. But they're also trying to buy a starter house that's $550,000, right? But if you want to pay teachers better, then you can't be a low tax state. It doesn't work that way. Unless you want to have like the teacher lotto salary jackpot, where it's a giant 50-50 every week, and we all buy lottery tickets that go to teacher bonuses, and then 50% goes to the winner, and the other 50% gets spread out in the paychecks every week. There's no other way around it, Joe Ferretti.
No, and the discussion clearly indicates that all things are relative. We're looking at West Virginia compared to our neighboring states, but the author goes a step further and says nationally we are lagging behind. Remember the data I cited to about the other industrialized countries in the world. We're in the bottom half of those top 25 industrialized countries in terms of what we pay our teachers nationally. And the $100,000 figure is based upon that average salary for teachers nationally of $66,000. It would take another $34,000 to raise somebody to $100,000, and that would close the gap with the other data I cited, which is that teachers, again, many of them with master's degrees plus, are making 25% less than other college graduates with similar degree attainment. So to get the teachers at a level where they're getting paid what their cohorts are getting paid who graduated from college and took different career paths, it would take that kind of money. Now, nationally, it would be $100 billion to raise teachers up if the federal government starts helping fund teacher pay across the country. That's a lot of money, but that's what we spend in 5.5 weeks on Medicare nationally. It is a fraction of the GDP of this country. And it is something we have to look at because the idea with the cardboard salesman, the author talked about a teacher who left his job after 15 years and went and became a salesperson for a cardboard company, and in 7 months made what he makes annually as a teacher. So if we're going to recognize that teachers are really educating our future generations who are going to run this country, what kind of priority should we put on paying them a salary that's going to get us the best and brightest teachers, who's going to allow people to go to college, get an education degree, and earn a living, raise a family, buy a house, do those things that we all strive to do in life. I think look, 100,000, I concede it's a pipe dream, but it is an idea I think we have to look at seriously if we're going to really make a dent with the problems in our education. There are many other problems that we have to focus on, but teacher pay is one of the biggest, and I think we have to look at that in a bold way.
Joe, good stuff to start us off as always. Much appreciated. Bat and leadoff. Admiral, you are on deck. This segment of our program today brought to you in part by the Wagner Law Firm, West Virginia's premier DUI defense attorneys. Excuse me. Also by Hagerstown Ford, the Berkeley County Health Department, Mansion Ferretti Law Firm as well, WBJusticeLawyers.com, and the Berkeley County Health Department's Quick Response Team. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg, and TV10 Bill is on the clock.
One more reason for you to worry, 'cause you got the best of me.
We are produced by the sports doctor Colin McLaughlin and brought to you in part by elder care attorney Danny Staggers in downtown Martinsburg at 304-267-3915 and by CMA Honda, the Friday crew in studio with Larry Schultz. Mr. Schultz, good morning to you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful
Great to
have
be
you
here.
Yeah, well, you've been an infrequent participant lately.
It's true.
It's good to have you
Pressures
back.
of work and other things have gotten in the way, and that's a shame.
It's a shame when the job gets in the way of the job.
That's true.
Also via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti.
Good morning, everyone.
Delegate Michael Heitz,
Good morning. Great to be here.
senior member of our crew, Mr. Michael Carl.
Good morning.
And with issue number 2, two-star himself, the Admiral Bill Stubblefield.
Rob, Joe introduced a local state issue, which gives me the latitude of going to a federal issue. The question for this presidential election, is it going to be determined primarily on issues or likability? We around this table, being political junkies, automatically default to the issues, and I think much of our listening audience would do the same thing. Issues would be the driver. I'm not sure, though, how far that extends. Case in point, USA Today recently conducted a poll, and it said between 7 to 15 points, Kamala Harris is viewed as more honest and trustworthy and mentally sharper and better understands the problems. Now, this was before any press conference. This was before really any real exposure. They went on to study with a poll that says voters 18 to 34 years of age moved from supporting Trump by 11 points to now supporting Harris by 13 points. Hispanics, a group which the Republicans have been cultivating, moved from supporting Trump by 2 points to supporting Harris by 16 points. Black voters, traditionally one of the most overwhelming Democratic groups, moved from supporting Biden by 47 points to supporting Harris by 64 points. The point again is, and this is just a snapshot of three demographics. There's going to be others that would argue the other. I fully understand that. But the point is, are we oversimplifying the election by saying it's going to be based upon issues and discounting a lot of those folks that are not the political junkies that are going to respond to the likability? And I think it cuts both ways. Biden was not a particularly likable person. That's why Trump, I think, was benefiting. Harris is much more likable, and that's why I think she's benefiting. So the polls indicate that a large group of individuals are looking at likability over issues. My questions thrown out to my colleagues.
All right, I suspect this might have been part of the breakfast conversation yesterday. So, Mike Carl, likability, is that the reason why people vote?
Well, it was not part of the.
Oh, I'm shocked.
I wish I'd gotten a little practice on this.
I was trying to
With some egg, bacon.
but it's easy to totally reject.
Mike, you never disappoint.
I have a lot more confidence in American voters than you've just suggested, and the conclusion that she's more likable. I mean, Trump is could be obnoxious and off-putting and all that, no question about it. But that she's appealing, personally is. I don't get that, because I've heard a little bit about what she's been for and against and what she's done, and it's not likable.
So, Mike, would you say that Bill's premise overall is ludicrous and shouldn't be considered by the rest of the panel?
No, I'd like to hear their criticism as well as mine.
So lump it on as much as possible is what you're saying.
Right.
Mike's been polite this morning. On Thursday morning, sometimes he's more plenty.
I don't know. I thought he was pretty humorous there. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I mean, I think every American election is decided, if the choice is either likability or issues, the vast majority, if not every single presidential election, is decided by likability.
So you disagree with Mr. Carl entirely?
Yeah, I do. And the reason is, look back through the history of elections that were won and lost by various people. And now, likability can change from your first election to your second run, because the issues that you worked on or failed to work on can start to bleed into that likability. But I do believe it is a very big factor. on its face, Ronald Reagan was not one of the most genius, and he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
You be careful what you say, Larry.
Yeah. Oh, I'm being very careful what I say. I lived this. He wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was liked. He was likable, and that definitely carried him a long ways. And so it wasn't so much the issues as his likability. And of course, they're not totally separate. You can get people who really like you to come to your side of an issue because they really like you.
True.
We see that every day in courtrooms, for example. I think a likability is always slightly ahead.
Mr. Height.
Well,
Did you have a comeback, Mike, Carl?
Just real quick, even I would say Hillary was more likable than Trump, and yet she lost.
I don't know. Hillary is not liked by a lot
Actually,
of people.
she won the popular vote.
She did.
I mean, by 4 million
Yeah,
votes.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So
I think this question plays to the bases. I think if you look at the Democratic and liberal base, that likability is one of the number one issues. And you can look at Harris's platform. It is all about joy, fairy dust, and unicorns. And the Republicans are more about, what is the policy? What is, we don't care so much about likability. That's how Trump got elected. It's not so much about that. It's about what are you going to do? And, while I think Trump lost last time because of that, I think it was a likability issue. And I think Biden came in, and at that point, he was more likable. And however, I think we have lived through 3.5 years of what you get when your platform is joy, fairy dust, and unicorns. And now people are saying this is going to have to be more about policy, and we have to take a serious look at policy. And that's what we're voting on. And that's why you can see people saying, your platform over the past 3.5 years has gotten us inflation. It's gotten us disrespect on the world stage, and it's just not working for us. And even though there are those never Trumpers out there who didn't like Trump, some of them are having a second look now and saying, yeah, okay, I still don't like him, but, and I think that's where we are right now.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I agree with Bill's premise. I think likability has a lot to do with the fact that we're in a very tight race. Does anybody here this morning believe that if Nikki Haley was the Republican nominee, that she wouldn't be winning this race?
By a landslide.
Yeah, probably fairly well.
If she was a Republican on the merits, not on just likability, but on the merits.
Well, I think, look, what clearly I think shapes this race somewhat is the insult comic routine that we get from Trump. He can't stop himself from doing that, even though even his own aides are trying to get him to focus on policy. He still is apt to do that, and did it just as late as last night, accusing Harris of doing some kind of lewd sex act. I mean, it's tiresome, it's embarrassing, it's something you don't want your kids to see. And frankly, I think that's why it's a tight race. I think Bill's premise is correct, that if likability, if it wasn't important, I think that this wouldn't be a tight race, but it is. And, Nikki Haley was correct. The first party that's going to get rid of one of these old guys off the ticket is probably going to win. And right now she's proving to be a little bit prophetic. I mean, it's a long way till we vote, but I just think that Trump is so polarizing. And I look back at other elections. George W. Bush, who wasn't a policy wonk by any stretch, but he was the kind of guy I remember people saying, it'd be great to have a beer with him. And he ran against two stiffs, and Al Gore and John Kerry. And so I think likability has something to do in that race a little bit. And the same thing back to Clinton when he ran against Bob Dole. Dole was a policy wonk. He was a president of the Senate. And but yet he was crusty and shot from the lip. And, Bill Clinton was a good old boy from Arkansas. So I think that has something to do with it. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, but in a tight race, it could mean a difference.
I agree with you, Joe. I think likability does become a part of it with a pretty good segment of the people who vote, because I don't think that many people take that much time to investigate all the policies and thoughts of all the people who are running for office. I don't think they have the time to. Too busy commuting to work and getting the kids off to their activity and then getting the house cleaned up and then getting to bed, and you're exhausted and you start up the next day and the whole process repeats itself. And then you have people you have to vote for. Well, who has time to look into all of that, right? Other you get maybe the sound bites on TV. I think there are some people like us and maybe another 20% of the population who put a lot into determining who they're going to vote for. But I think when you mentioned Al Gore, Joe, and I just remember watching that Democratic National Convention back then where he was supposed to dance with Tipper because that's what he had to do on the stage. And he looked like Herman Munster with bolts in his neck, trying to turn his body and move side to side. And I looked at that and I went, oh, my goodness. Does this guy have a personality other than Washington, D.C.? I mean, yeesh. And then you'd see George Bush like, oh, shucks, gosh, hey, how you doing? Good to see you there, Brownie. Brownie's doing a great job there with FEMA. You know, that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, all right. Yeah, Brownie, yeah, that kind of stuff. That's just a way of a lot of people kind of, you perceive someone and you say, well, you know what? Now, do you have your party affiliates who you're only going to vote for a Republican because that's what you are, and you're only going to vote for a Democrat because that's what you are? But that 20 or 30% in the middle that changes over from side to side, I think likability does have to play at least some part in it, Mike. You don't think?
No, I agree it plays some part, but I think you're overstating how much. And
that's fair.
You know, but no question it plays some part.
Just keep in mind I control your mic. You're now muted for disagreeing with me, Mike.
Yeah.
All right, issue number 3. We move on. It goes back to you, Bill.
Yeah,
Sorry.
very quickly. And likability covers is a large umbrella. Integrity, honesty, perception of transparency, all of those kind of fold into the likability. But the numbers I showed or mentioned, I thought were pretty telling, and they were individuals that made a fairly significant shift from Trump to Harris in certain demographics. Other demographics, I'm sure, would show something altogether different.
All right, Mr. Height, you are on now with issue number 3.
All right, well, I'm going to sort of go along with this same theme here, and my question is, what does it say about the Democratic nominee when 2 previous Democratic presidential candidates endorse now Trump and have joined his team?
That's a pretty quick premise.
That's it.
That's a short setup and a quick premise. All right, what does it say, Joe Ferretti?
Well, Mike, who are they?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard is one who was a presidential candidate who has now joined Trump's team and endorsed him, and RFK Jr., who was a presidential candidate on the Democratic candidate ticket and now endorses Trump and has joined his team.
You've answered the question, Mike.
Well, actually, no. I mean, they were RFK has a following, whether you like it or not. Even as an independent, he has a following, and he was with the Democrats. His family has been with the Democrats for years.
They aren't with him, though.
well, his family's not, right, because they moved with the Democratic Party left. I can tell you right now, the Democratic Party today is not John Kennedy's Democratic Party.
Well, is the Republican Party Ronald Reagan's party?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
no.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
No. I can't believe you guys would insult Mr. Reagan that way.
John Kennedy passed tax cuts. Ronald Reagan forgave illegal immigrants. Right?
Yes.
Amnesty?
Which
Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Amnesty?
Yeah, they were both closer to the middle of the spectrum, weren't they? And now we're at polar opposites, and which is what you see when you look back anything in 20, 30 years. But Mike, to answer your question, I don't know that Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are representative of the Democratic Party, nor do I think that they were for quite a while now. However, I will respond by saying this. How many former cabinet members who served in the room, served at the will and pleasure of President Trump, are telling us not to reelect them? I'll tell you, almost half of that crew is telling us not to reelect the guy. So you run a business, and I'm sure when you hire people, you check references. If you went out and checked references and half of the people who employed your applicant said, don't hire this person, my guess is you probably wouldn't hire them. So if we're looking at crossovers here, I don't know that you've got a persuasive argument here. I saw a lot of Republicans speaking at the DNC just a week and a half ago. I don't remember seeing a lot of Democrats speaking at the RNC. There were a few, but not many. So I don't know that your argument's persuading me.
But my argument had nothing to do with Trump and Democrats moving to the Republican ticket. My question had everything to do with the Democrats moving to the Republican ticket. And you turned the question around and pushed it back on Trump and his team. My question was about the Harris platform and the fact that Democratic candidates for president are now endorsing Trump.
Now, with three attorneys in the room, I hope you three attorneys can appreciate what Mike Hite just did here, because he did what you folks do in the courtroom all the time. That's not the question that I asked. That's not the premise that I set up. So you gotta appreciate that as attorneys, what he just did there, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and be next. In fact, as Joe was pointing out, there are something like 200 former employees, campaign people for Romney, the Bushes, and others of the Republican Party who have come together and endorsed the ticket. So it is a question that can be asked both ways. You didn't ask it both ways for reasons I well understand, because your example were two loons and the other example were people who actually work for the United States government at some point.
Mr. Schultz, please answer the directed question as it has been presented to you.
Spun it again.
The witness will be asked to answer the question directly.
The question was a spin move to begin with, because the real problem that the Republican Party has now is you talk to a lot of Republicans, and I talk to people in my office and on the street at times, who say, boy, I've been a Republican all my life. I have no damn idea what I'm going to do.
Again, this is not the question Mr. Hite asked you, Mr. Schultz. Please answer the question you were asked.
Right. The question we were asked was, does the movement of two extremely loony non-Democrats...
That's not the wording Mr. Hite used.
Well,
the witnesses are instructed to answer the question.
The fact that he left the truth out of his question doesn't bar me from bringing the truth back.
Redirect, Mr. Hite.
Rob is having a field day today. He's found his niche.
Yeah, he always wanted to be a judge, I think.
Mike, permission to treat this as a hostile witness. Mr. Stubblefield.
Yeah. I'm going to respond by one of our Facebook contributors. I expected a better question from Mike. I like his point of view, but this question is hilarious. Or you might say, let me substitute, this question is ludicrous.
Got some Carrie.
Got some Carrie.
Carrie, can I have children? Carrie, I love you. You're the best. I don't even remember what the question was at this point.
Yeah, I forgot it as soon as that was asked.
Mr. Carl, you are not laughing, nor are you smiling.
Well, as a longtime Republican, let me say that, first of all, I seriously question the legitimacy, accuracy, truthfulness of all this recitation about the Republicans who are against Trump and are going to support Harris. I think it's an absolute lie, and if it isn't, then those people are not Republicans. They're playing games. They're doing something. They got a game. They're trying to do something, and a real Republican has to oppose Harris and support Trump.
Yeah, I gather definition of a real Republican is your view of the issue.
It's yes.
Okay.
Mitt Romney's no longer a Republican. Sorry, bud. Sorry,
You're
Mr.
gone.
Romney, you're no longer a Republican.
Well, if you have proof, and I haven't heard the citation of the actual evidence that Romney says he's for Harris and against Trump.
Okay, I'll supply that to you.
Please do.
Yeah.
Send me something that's legitimate. Not from the general media either.
Mike, this question was among the more interestingly responded to questions that have been thrown out there for the panel over the years.
Let me say this.
Yes, please
say
do,
this.
because this
I will.
This is
I
the
will
need of
somewhat
something.
agree that RFK Jr. is a loon at times, and he has some views that are out there.
which dead animal thrown in the park would
Tulsi Gabbard
between you two?
is not.
Height credibility rising.
Tulsi Gabbard was a John F. Kennedy Democrat. She was very smart, served our country well. She dominated Harris when they debated each other on the stage. She's the one that took her out of the presidential race originally. So don't tell me Tulsi Gabbard is some loon Democrat, because she's not. She's very smart, and she had very good ideas.
But she left the Democratic Party shortly after that debate.
Rightfully so, because the Democrat Party moved beyond. It's not a John F. Kennedy Democrat Party anymore.
Yeah, and we'll come back to the question we asked earlier: is the Republican Party still a Ronald Reagan Party today?
But that's not the question I asked.
We're going back in this do loop again.
This Republican is still a Reagan Republican.
So am I.
Well,
I get called a rhino a lot, but I'm a Reagan Republican.
but it comes back. It comes
there you
back
go.
to a couple of questions that were asked and premises that were thrown out here during there. So, one, I agree with you about Tulsi Gabbard, first and foremost. RFK, to me, that's just not somebody I would consider junior, one way or the other. I don't regard his views as being even legitimate on half the things that I don't even know if he believes half the things that he says sometimes. But you can't ask one without the contrary being thrown to you in all seriousness. I mean, when I look at the Democratic National Convention, you see former presidents who are on stage supporting the current nominee. When I looked at the Republican National Convention, were there any former Republican presidents? I'm not sure how many are still alive other than Bush 41 who were there to speak for Trump,
No.
right?
Or cabinet members.
Or cabinet members. I mean, it is the Trump party, and that was a Trump party convention. Or there would have been more prominent. I mean, how many Republican conventions do you go back on where the only Republican that was of prominence speaking for those who had been presidents was the one right there? Where were the former presidents? We always in the past brought out the former presidents, but not this time. Have they all been excommunicated from the Republican Party for not being real Republicans?
Well,
Could everybody? Is everybody else wrong? Yeah, I believe there's only one still alive.
And Trump and that family don't get along, so I wouldn't have expected them to come out.
But in the past, they have come out, right?
Sure.
So is it really the Republican Party, or is it the Trump Party?
Well, it's the Trump party right now. I mean, Trump, his whole premise when he ran was to get away from the swamp, and the Bushes were considered part of the swamp, and he made that abundantly clear. Obviously, there was a Bush on the stage when he ran in the primary originally in 2016, so, I can see why they don't get along.
All right, we are done with issue number 3. Larry Schultz, you lead off the next segment after the break. This little Dukes of Hazzard theme playing us out here because Ben Jones, born in the state 1941 there. It's 9:31, and we're back with issue number 4. Larry Schultz next.
Someday the mountain might get 'em, but the law never will. Making their way
is Berkeley County is using taxpayer funds to pay a lobbying firm to seek appropriations from the West Virginia legislature. Can someone explain why that is not the job of the legislators themselves?
Mr. Michael Hunt, you are a legislator. Is that not your job to make sure the Eastern Panhandle is represented and taken care of?
That's part of my job, but that is not in total my job. When you think about what a lobbyist does, is they will take a certain issue or a set of issues. In this case, needs for Berkeley County in the as bills, and they will try to push that narrative through the House and the Senate. As a delegate, I'm tasked with all of the bills of the state that I may see over a 60-day session, and I'm talking thousands. So I don't have the time as a delegate to focus all of my attention on what Berkeley County's issues may or may not be. I do focus some of my time and try to direct those bills to the finish line, but I also have to focus on other bills and other committees and a plethora of other things, whereas a lobbyist can go down and focus on that. And what they can do is they can meet with the other 99 delegates, or let's say 80 delegates when you take away the Panhandle, other 80 delegates, and try to push that agenda and explain to those delegates what it is that Berkeley County needs and why, and convince them to vote the right way, or the way they want the vote to go. And the same thing on the Senate side. I very rarely have interactions with the Senate while I'm down there, and certainly don't have time to try to convince them to vote a certain way on a bill. And so that lobbyist has the ability to go to those people on the House side and to those people on the Senate side, educate them, and try to convince them to vote a certain way. They're not appropriating money, as you might say. They're trying to get bills passed that are beneficial to Berkeley County.
Mr. Stubblefield, you were a county commissioner. How many trips did you make to Charleston to try to get Berkeley County what you thought it was owed?
I made several trips to Charleston, and I also utilized the County Commission Association to try to lobby for us as well. And I was a slow convert to using the lobbyist because of those two reasons. I thought we were successful in making numerous trips, and I thought the County Commission Association was effective, even though they had to represent all the state as opposed just the Panhandle. But after talking to two or three of the county commissioners who I have great respect for, and they're still going to Charleston. They're not abandoning Charleston. They feel they have been able to get several bills through over the finish line using the lobbyists that they would not have gotten through otherwise. So I've gone from being a skeptic to a supporter based upon the opinion, the honest, genuine opinion of folks that I have a lot of respect for.
Mike, are you going to claim attorney-client privilege on this one?
No. In fact, I want to say how much I agree with what Bill Stubblefield just said. You can't, and by not having a lobbyist, you surrender the impact, because other people, compete for public, actions by the legislature, and you have to, So I don't see anything wrong with it at all, and I think if you have the right lobbyists, it could be helpful.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I think it's a valid question to have, and what I'm hearing from people who know more about it than I do is that it's a good thing. I'm wondering, any other counties in the state have lobbyists, and or are we an outlier? And if so, maybe that's a good thing too, because maybe it's a novel approach to the legislature that other counties either can't afford or haven't thought of, and that could be a good thing for Berkeley County. Give us a leg up on some things. So what I'm I plead my ignorance here about the subject, but I think it's a valid question because if memory serves, the county does pay a significant sum for those services, but it sounds like we're getting return on that investment, and so I can easily be a convert myself.
Ken Mattson has been a very vocal critic of this, and he's run for different offices in his time here in Berkeley County. And he says, I've been an opponent to this. I am not unmovable on the subject. It's the price tag, and return on investment is not a valid retort. He doesn't say why it's not valid. I think it's a very valid retort. I think if you're spending $100,000 and you're getting back $2 million, I can't think of a more valuable retort for return on investment than that. However, if you take return on investment out of the equation, which Ken is doing there, Mike, why is it a justifiable expense, and why is the expense so high? It's not. I mean, obviously, you're.
Well,
not
I don't
in
know
county
that the
commission.
expense is high. I mean, you look at what the county commission is currently paying. It's under $200,000 a year for her to go down and spend. And I'm not just say her.
The company she works
the
for.
company she works
She's
for.
not getting $200,000.
No, absolutely, she's not. The company she works for, and there are 4 lobbyists within that company right now. She is one of them. But to go down there for 60 days and try to convince people of the merits of what Berkeley County needs, and we've complained here in the Eastern Panhandle for years about how Charleston doesn't listen to us. They don't give us what we need. You cannot underestimate how important building those relationships with delegates and senators from the southern part of this state is. And that is one of the things they do. And I hear talk about, oh my gosh, there was a $1,000 dinner bill to take out delegates and stuff like that. They're just partying down there. No, that is not what's happening. We spend all day in committees and on the floor, and at 5, 6 o'clock when we are done, we just want to go eat and go home because we know we have to read bills and just get away from it. It is not a big party down there. So how do lobbyists get our ear? They say, we know you want to leave. You're not going to take another meeting at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. Let us take you to dinner. Let us pitch our ideas to you. Let us try to convince you of what we're doing. So if you see a $1,000 dinner bill and there's 15 people at the dinner, that's not unreasonable. So I push back with things like that. I would not meet with these people if they weren't taking me to dinner, because I got to go eat dinner, and after that I'm going home. So that's the reason you do that with these lobbyists. That's the reason they do what they do.
Talk to me about Daniel Hall, Mike. You know who he is, and he's the person behind the lobbying group that represents Berkeley County.
He is the president of that particular organization. I can tell you right now, there is not a better lobbyist team in Charleston. That particular lobbyist team holds as much sway over individuals down there as any other lobbying team down there, and it is not. The reason for that is not because they take people to dinner. It's because they don't always talk about it. They try to build friendships and bridge the borders that between the Eastern Panhandle and the southern states, the Charlestons and the Martinsburgs and the Wheelings, and they try to build friendships, and then they try to convince you to vote certain ways. An exceptional lobbyist team down there.
Mr. Schultz, I guess it comes back to you.
Okay. One of the interesting things about this is I've spent my whole life listening to politicians in election years tell me about how much they did as my representative. And one of the things I thought they did was figure out how to make the legislature, by making trades and deals, how to make the legislature send money to my county so we could build something or fix something or make our schools better or whatever. Now what I'm understanding is I should be thanking the lobbyists because they're the ones who are doing it, or thanking the Berkeley County Council for deciding to hire a lobbying team. I always thought that, especially in a small state like this, that it would be truthful when a candidate for the House who was running for re-election came back and said, here's what I did for the county. And now it turns out the one that I've heard about that was a part of this was $25 million for stormwater management. And what I understood was that getting close to the cutoff, Berkeley County didn't have its application in order. And it was going to be rejected because it wasn't righteous. And they fixed it in the last couple of weeks. Now, I'm not blaming the legislatures only. If that needed to be fixed, how come Berkeley County doesn't have a person who could fix that application? Why do we have to hire another person to do those jobs? And so this isn't an attempt to be critical of the legislature. I just don't understand how the system works anymore, because I used to believe my representatives when they told me I got this money for Berkeley County. Apparently in Berkeley County now they didn't.
Well, sometimes you do. Sometimes as a representative, a delegate, you may be the one that sponsors that particular bill. So you may be the one trying to push it, and you have somebody like Access Strategies that will take up and stand behind that bill and push it on the Senate side and push it to the other delegates throughout the House. So because you don't have time to go through and try to push your bill, your idea, all the time to all 80 or 90 other delegates. You do as much as you can, but you have to focus on all the other bills too. And as far as friendships and stuff, if you don't build friendships down there, you'll never get anything. That's why we haven't for so long, is I think it's always been a us against them mentality, for them as much as us. Well, you have to build some friendships down there. You have to go down to the southern part of the state and show them that you're interested in their well-being. And if you show that, then they'll show that they have interest in your well-being as well. But it's not enough. You have to have somebody like a lobbyist to go and push those ideas and explain those ideas to the other 120 people.
On to issue. Did you have a comeback?
No,
On to
it's
issue
fine.
number 5 then. And with that, Mr. Michael Carl.
This is a simple question to each of you.
Who's the bigger idiot, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris?
No. Do you agree? I'm using both those names. Do you agree that Biden and Harris's student loan forgiveness attempts is the same as buying votes with public funding?
All right, that's an interesting question there. Let's start with you, Mr. Stubblefield.
No, I don't think it's as simplistic as just buying votes, Mike. I think both Biden and Harris firmly believe in what they are, what the student loan program has done, and it's crippling. Has it been managed as well as it should in the past? I'm not in a position to judge that. I use the GI Bill, which was instrumental to me to get to my degrees. So I did not use the student loan, but I'm not sure that they should be, because they use a student loan as a student, should they be penalized with these massive amount of paying back for many, many, many years. I think what Biden and Harris are doing is very popular with a lot of people in our community. So with our nation, I don't think it's as simple as buying votes, Mike. However, there is room for criticism, and Supreme Court has recently demonstrated that there is room for criticism.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, we can always come up with a rationale for a public policy proposal such as writing down student debt. I recall the rationale being that too many in this recent generation of college grads are saddled with debt, can't qualify for a mortgage to buy a home because of the debt. And the thinking was, if we could help them in that process, then they're going to be able to buy homes, which helps the economy significantly. So there's a theory behind it, just like there was a theory that corporate tax cuts would spur capital expenditures by the corporations, and business would grow and people would get hired and everybody would be happy. But recall that a lot of that money from the corporate tax cuts in the Trump administration went to stock buybacks. I remember that being a significant criticism of that. So oftentimes it's public policy with a rationale attached that looks good, but in reality isn't. There was a lot of blowback on the student loan forgiveness, and a lot of people who didn't have student loans were justifiably upset because they wouldn't benefit at all, at least directly. But Sure, it's all about buying votes, and it's pandering, and that's all we hear, frankly, from these candidates to date. Is a lot of pandering and not a lot of specifics. Ending the war in one day in Ukraine without any plan, to me, is pandering. And I think certainly Harris and Walz will be just as guilty of pandering to their constituencies, and it's left to us to sort out. And it gets back to Bill Stubblefield's point that perhaps likability will be how people decide this race.
Mr. Height?
Well, Mike's question was pretty simplistic. And the answer is, too, yes, Mike, they're buying votes. Joy, fairy dust, unicorns, yes. Yes, they're buying votes. It's been struck down by the Supreme Court on several occasions. They just come with another way of saying the same old thing. It'll get struck down. They know it's going to get struck down by the Supreme Court. It is nothing more than buying votes. All this other, trying to explain, well, the loans are too high. And listen, students took out loans. They signed on the dotted line. They knew what the interest rate was to begin with. They knew how much the student loan was to begin with. You signed on the dotted line. Pay back your loan. If you didn't want the loan, then don't sign. Go do something else. Go get a job for a while and build up some money and go to college and pay for it. The working class, those people who took trades jobs, are now the ones being asked to pay back these student loans. And that is just wrong. Yes, Mike, they're buying votes.
Thank you.
I simply think that you could take care of Mr. Height's concern by raising the corporate and wealthy people's tax rates back to what they were before Trump cut them. Then the middle class would benefit, and the wealthy, who I realize always get money given to them by our Republican friends, would take a tiny hit. No big deal.
And again, somebody else pays back the loan that somebody else took out.
Just like
I lose my job,
my taxes didn't get lowered,
and I can't pay for my house,
the
people should pay my mortgage because I signed on the dotted line. Well, the rate was too high, or for some reason. That's nonsense. They signed for the loan. They agreed to pay the loan back. Pay it back.
Donald Trump ran $8 trillion of deficits during 4 years. All-time record.
8.2.
Right.
Technically, 8.2.
All-time record.
Did he take out the student loans?
No. He made the government do it because he could not control himself. And therefore, all of us, not just people who went to college, all of us are having to pay back his debt. So don't tell me about that.
We're not talking about his debt. We're talking about student loan debt. You know what? My kids took out student loan debt. You know what I told them? Shut your mouth and pay it back. That's what I told them.
My kids did the same thing, and they were lucky enough to be able to pay it back. But you know who can't pay it back?
Lucky enough? Why did you take it out if you couldn't pay it back?
Well, they were lucky enough that their life succeeded in a way that they could do it. But here's the thing. The very people we were talking about in such glowing terms a little while ago, school teachers, are the ones who are most going to be helped by this. Because here's the federal government saying, your state doesn't pay you diddly to be a teacher, but we're still going to hit you with the 7% annual rate that you signed up for. And that is crippling teachers' families specifically. So when you say, I'm a fan of teachers getting more money, we should be talking about the net amount of money that they get. And if you keep whacking them with these high interest rate student loans and don't raise their pay, they're not ever going to be able to have a house or kids or anything else. And that's not good for our country. It's just not.
You signed for the loan.
Mr.
Pay
Carl,
back the loan.
it was back to you.
Okay, Donald Trump, do it.
Jim
Justice?
I just want to clear up the discussion with the confusion and the misleading references to tax cuts under Trump. When you lower the income tax rates, the tax revenues go up because it's in a free enterprise system, and I'm the only one in here that apparently understands that.
You may be the only one who believes it. We all
It's an
understand it.
absolute truth.
But if you don't cut spending to go along with it, Mike, it leads to larger deficits. You got to cut spending to go along
All
with
the
the tax cuts.
spending is
You
yeah, exactly.
gotta cut spending.
But the amount of revenue went up when the tax rates went down.
only
But
got
the debt went up as
too.
well.
Because there
we
was too
didn't
much
cut
spending, not because of the tax cuts. The tax cuts stimulated more revenue.
The student loan thing to me is at the end of this cycle is that the federal government created this crisis when they decided that they would guarantee every single loan. They effectively made colleges crack addicts over federal government money. And what did colleges around the country do? Did they hold costs in check? No. They outpaced inflation every year, sometimes 2 and 3 times the pace of inflation with their increases in student tuition costs and such. And they created an environment where kids were borrowing a couple $100,000 to get a degree in teaching sometimes. Should they have done that? No. No, nobody should borrow that much money to get a job where you can't make that much money. The fact of the matter is the federal government created this mess in the first place.
So the other beneficiaries of this bad deal are the liberal colleges.
There's no beneficiaries because the federal debt continues to grow.
No, but
Hey, we got to get back with final thoughts. 8 seconds apiece next.
When she's dancing beneath the starry sky.
Final thoughts would be with you on the phone, Joe, for ready to go.
You could have had WVU at 12 points a month ago, but don't take the 9 points.
Larry
Too little.
Schultz, Penn Stater that you are.
I'm not even going to talk about that. The total federal deficit is $31 trillion. Donald Trump ran up a quarter of it in just 4 years.
Bill,
It's fun to be back with the Friday Five.
Michael Carl,
Cards have to face the Yankees.
Mr. Height.
Panhandle Printing is opening a new location in Berkeley Springs next Wednesday. Come out and see us.
Is that writing only? Because that could be a tough one.
Dave Ramsey Show is next. Have a great Labor Day weekend. We'll talk again at 94 short hours.